What's up everybody? Welcome to 4x Trail and to part 2 of the 1-ton steering video. As you can see, it's on and it's awesome. I'm going to be sharing more of my opinions on this system now that I've driven the Jeep at the end of the video. But the main part of this video is going to be some tips for installing a tie rod and drag link. I'm not going to do a how-to because it's really a simple process. But I actually ran into some hiccups, not because of the kit, but because of my Jeep, just some issues and it was kind of a learning curve on a couple of points. So I want to share some tips with you guys, as well as how to align your front end, at least roughly, before driving it to get a proper alignment. Because you want it to be as close to aligned as possible, even before driving it just a few miles. So I'm going to share with you how I did that. And yeah, this will be a fun video. Well guys, like I said, this project took a lot longer than it should have, about twice as long as I was hoping. And a lot of that was due to my Jeep. Even though it's low miles, it had a decent amount of surface rust because it was a northeast vehicle. And so decent amount of rust on those bolts, and it made for a very hard time getting the stock tie rod and drag link off. So first tip is definitely soak your nuts and bolts with PB Blaster. Even if it doesn't appear to have any rust on them, it just really helps with that. But even with PB Blaster, particularly the drag link to the pitman arm, that connection there was super difficult to get apart. I soaked it with PB Blaster a couple different times, and I had a little pitman arm puller, which you'll definitely need, that you can get at your auto parts store. But even with that puller on there and soaked in PB Blaster, that thing was not coming off, and I had to, actually my dad was over the next day and I had him come out to the garage, and we leveraged the stock drag link over to the side, put some pressure on it, had the puller on there, put some PB Blaster in there, and I was tapping on it with a hammer before that thing let loose. It was crazy how tight that connection had become with rust. But we got it, and once those connections were loose, that was the first step out of the way, the first battle. But the nuts themselves then, even though they were loose, because what you want to do is when you're taking your drag link and tie rod off, you loosen the nuts and then you tap them out, or use a puller to get the bars to drop down, and then you finish taking the nuts off. Well, that last little bit of taking the nuts off, 3 out of the 4 started spinning the bolt in the socket of the old tie rod and drag link. And even with an Allen key down inside there and using a wrench, they were just locked up tight and spinning that bolt. So I actually had to cut 3 of the 4 nuts off of the bolt. And for that, I used my Dremel 3000. That thing was a lifesaver, especially with the little cutting wheels. They look like little angle grinder wheels. Those things were awesome, and they made short work of those nuts. But I tell you, it made for this to be just kind of a pain, this process of getting the old tie rod and drag link off. Once they were off and out of the way, the new kit bolted up just fine. There was no issues whatsoever. The second thing that was a challenge, besides removing the old tie rod and drag link, was getting the front end somewhat aligned. Just getting my toe, somewhat close, because that's the main thing on the Wranglers, is just getting the toe right. And so to do that, I actually used some paracord and some jack stands to create a square around the vehicle. I set up 4 jack stands. Actually, I used a ladder for one of the corners. And I ran that paracord, stretched it taut around the Jeep. And since my wheels and tires were off, I was able to sight down the paracord along the outer edge of each brake rotor, the disc brakes, and check my side to side, because I put on, actually installed a heavy duty track bar while I was in there. And so I was able to adjust my front to rear axle, sideways, get that right. But then also you can check your toe that way, because if you sight down the paracord, if you have that paracord real close to your rear disc and running forward past your front disc, and you sight down it, you'll see if your front disc is off, turned, towed in or towed out, and you want to have the paracord running down the other side of the vehicle as well, so you can compare, and you can actually get your toe pretty close that way, just using paracord or a heavy duty string right there in your garage. And that's super helpful, because you don't want to drive very far to get an alignment with your toe way out of whack because you'll eat up your tires. So that's something that might help somebody out there if you're trying to get a rough alignment in your garage. Well, guys, I just got back from driving with the tie rod and drag link on. Honestly, it feels about like I would hope that it should. The steering is more heavy. It just feels a lot more positive and reassuring, you know, with every movement. Much more engaged feeling. And I don't even have the steering stabilizer hooked on yet because I have to put that bracket that they included in this kit on, and so I haven't done that. But yeah, I mean, just even without the steering stabilizer, the quality of the steering feel is so much better. So I can't wait to get this thing off-road and feel the difference, but on-road, my only thought is, why didn't I do this sooner? Well, guys, that's it for part 2 of the 1-ton steering video, but my steering is not finished being upgraded because to move these big 37s, especially off-road, I'm going to need to add at least one more key piece to this setup. So if you're in the process of upgrading your steering, stay tuned. Hopefully later this summer, I'll be adding in something else that I'm looking forward to. Well, guys, hopefully you enjoyed this video. Give it a thumbs up if so. Make sure to subscribe for lots more great content here on 4x Trail. I'll see you guys soon.